This is BBC Television.
It is 0830 hours, September the 14th, 1988. These are children of our time. They should live to be 100. They may colonize the stars. They will not toil. They need never be unhappy. But this morning, as every morning, there is a problem. How to spend a golden lifetime. What to do with so much time. From this September morning in 1988, look back across a quarter of a century. This was London 25 years ago in 1963. And these were the days, so close to our own in time, so remote in style, when vast armies of human beings were still employed in offices and factories. Scenes like this, the rush hours as they used to call them, were not of course confined to London. But here their scale was greater because of the trend reversed only a few years ago to concentrate so much of the nation's business and of its population in the capital. Every working day in 1963, more than 1.25 million people poured into central London to work. Work, getting to work, getting back from work. This, for many people, was a large part of life 25 years ago. These were the years of the crawling motor car. In 1963, about 100,000 people drove to work in central London each day. Their number multiplied into a traffic engineer's nightmare. By the middle 60s, London was choked. Great traffic jams stretched through the city every morning and evening.
I mean, yesterday, I set out from Hounslow at 7 o'clock in the morning. By the time I got to Knightsbridge, they were all going home. Down at the works, they'd all gone except the security guard. They've all gone home, he says.
Why don't you use public transport?
I've got a bad back, you see. I can't afford to get mixed up in these punch-ups morning and night on the underground.
In April 1967, the morning rush hour and the evening rush hour had become one. This, the first of the great traffic jams of the 60s, took nearly a week to clear. Few motorists in 1967 had television in their cars. Only the most affluent were able to sit back and watch the historic first broadcast from the Russians on the moon.
Here in Red Square, there's tremendous excitement. It's been building up for hours. The square's packed with people, cheering, dancing, waving, clutching each other. They're even over in the corner there throwing the Red Army up in the air, I see, which is very unusual in Moscow. No one knows what we're going to see from the moon. We're told that we probably shall not see the Americans, who are established somewhere on the other side. No one minds what they see as long as they see something, and here are the first pictures on the television screens in the square now. The surface of the moon by television for the first time, and they're two members of the Soviet expedition. There must be three, one somewhere here behind the camera, in their space suits, moving weightlessly. What a fascinating sight to see this direct for the first time across the face of a moon that looks, I must say, exactly as I, and no doubt you, thought it would look. Now already with these pictures down in Moscow again, and here in the square they're going mad. The slogans are being brought through. What do they say? Thus, man breaks out from the narrow confines of his environment. We are the masters of unlimited space. We've begun the free and joyful journey to the ends of the universe.
Top people rose above the turmoil, above a London which in 1968 banished the car to its outskirts, but still needed enormous armies of workers every day. People on their way up, but not yet airborne, spared themselves the struggles of daily travelling by moving their homes back from the suburbs into the city. Hitherto unfashionable districts closer to the office rose rapidly in esteem. The old houses remained and grew older. Their market value soared.
2 intimate reception rooms, 2 small but cosy bedrooms, convivial district, room for bath, £13,000.
A new type of resident had come to the East End. It was a long stride in those days around 1970 from the meanness of home, where the young executive left his wife, to the splendor of the office where he worked.
Our places of work become grander, shining and white and tall. We walk upon thick-piled carpets with fluorescent lights on the wall. We pass through a marble entrance, as splendid as Pharaoh's tomb. We go back to our tiny terraces, and then sleep 6 in a room. But it all may change tomorrow. The trend is perfectly clear. We'll work at home in the daytime and sleep in these offices here.
Of all the changes in these 25 years, the greatest has been in the way that people work. Back in 1963, and indeed for several years afterwards, acres of floor space were covered by human beings working away like the cells of a modern machine. Except in times of recession, the demand for these workers was endless, and the task they did endlessly repeated, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, perhaps for a whole lifetime. The patience of a saint, the manual dexterity of a juggler, the ability to shut off great areas of the mind. This was all that was asked of millions of people. The great reservoir of brain power that lay in this enormous labor force was almost untapped, and of the few who had the job of thinking, scarcely any foresaw the extent of the new industrial revolution that was to end scenes like this forever. Mechanization had, of course, already reached a highly advanced stage, but automation, the word that has made our world, remained just a word in many industrial organizations. Industry, in 1963, was in fact a highly mechanized process in which human beings were used as extensions of the machinery. The production lines set the pace, and for the people on them, life went by in endless repetition. The same task over and over again, hundreds, thousands, millions of times. The answer to tedium was tea, and when there was no tea, there was trouble. Yet few of these workers would have foreseen the technological revolution which was then impending as a means of liberation from monotony. When they thought about it at all, they were suspicious of it. So too were some of the most distinguished thinkers of the early 60s.
I think one can say that the whole history of recent times in relation to science and technology shows that if you plant the seed of applied science or technology, it proceeds to grow, and it grows according to the laws of its own being. And the laws of its being are not necessarily the same as the laws of our being. I mean, hence this sense which so many people have, and which I think one sees in so many societies, this sense that man is being subjected to his own inventions, that he is now the victim of his own technology and the victim of his own applied science, instead of being in control of it.
Workers everywhere around 1970 felt themselves victims of the new technology. Millions disappeared forever from the factory floor. Industrial plants began to take on their modern look. The human being was no longer a link in a mechanical process. The machines did the work. The men who remained supervised. By the early 1970s, a new kind of factory worker had emerged, the highly trained technician who passed his time with a bit of light reading and, by and large, left it to the computers to control the automatic processes of manufacture.
We measure the efficiency of our operation by the inactivity of these chaps. If they're bobbing about, we know that things aren't going too smoothly. That's what automation means, basically. Machines carrying through a whole series of operations by themselves without human intervention. That's why there's nothing like the same need for the skilled or semi-skilled chap on the factory floor.
But this had been foreseen, Sir John.
But at the same time, there are many more men behind the machines. Electronics engineers, designers, computer programmers, and so forth. The artisan has in fact been replaced by the technologist and the technician. We don't take on apprentices anymore. We get technically trained people from the universities.
What responsibility do you feel towards workers replaced in this way?
Every responsibility. We have our own training schemes, and ideally we should have turned them all into technicians. But with the best will in the world, there are problems of basic education, unadaptability, and so forth. After all, these chaps are getting the national salary for going through the motions of working a 3-day week. And if I was in their shoes, I'd settle down to enjoy my leisure, make the best of it, instead of kicking up against it.
If a 24-hour week is all that brilliant, why did that lot up there put themselves on a 24-hour week? All this leisure's all right for me and for you, but it's all right for them. They're up there working away 60, 70, 80 hours a week. We didn't ask for all this leisure, and we don't want it.